Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, major airports across the nation hit with cancellations as FAA flight reductions take effect. Will this push lawmakers to reach an agreement to end the government shutdown? Elise Martinez has the latest from Capitol Hill. That's as the USDA announces it's working to fully fund food stamp benefits for November. It's the latest step in a weeks-long saga that affects nearly the 42 million Americans who rely on food stamps. President Trump listing the major reasons why he wants Republicans to terminate the filibuster and what he says about the chances of a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest. Mariotsu at the White House. Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik announces she's entering the race for New York governor, what she says about issues in the Empire State and how Governor Kathy Hochul responds. Will the Supreme Court overturn same-sex marriage? The justices will soon decide whether to take up an appeal revisiting the landmark 2015 ruling.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump listing what he thinks Republicans could accomplish if they terminate the filibuster, and the president saying there's a very good chance he'll meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest. This as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán hails a golden age of U.S.-Hungary relations. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotsu, who's at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest in domestic news coming out of the Trump administration today?
Tiff, good evening. President Trump is repeatedly urging Senate Republicans today to terminate the filibuster, saying that it's the only way to end the government shutdown. The president is also saying that Democrats will inevitably terminate the filibuster when they have the chance, and so Republicans should do it now. And if they did do it now, they would have a few years to accomplish these things. Take a look.
Here's some of the things that we'd pass if we terminated the filibuster. Voter ID, no mail-in voting, no cash bail, no men and women's sports, no welfare for illegals. You could go on and on. This is 2 pages of things we'd do if you did that.
And the U.S. Department of Agriculture is announcing that it's working to fully fund Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP benefits, in compliance with a federal court order. The USDA says that this process should be done by the end of today. Tiff?
And Mari, moving to foreign affairs now, what is the latest on President Trump's efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine war?
Sure, Tiff. So when President Trump today welcomed the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán to the White House, he said that there's now a, quote, very good chance that he'll meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but that he'll have more to say about this after his meeting with Orbán, given that Orbán, quote, knows and understands Vladimir Putin very well. And meanwhile, Bloomberg and AP are now reporting that President Trump is granting Hungary an exemption from secondary sanctions for buying Russian oil. Take a look at President Trump's reasoning for this.
Because it's very difficult for him to get the oil and gas from other areas. As you know, they don't have the advantage of having sea.
This is coming after President Trump imposed what he called tremendous sanctions on Russia's 2 biggest oil companies in October, while calling on Moscow to immediately agree to a ceasefire. The president justifying exemptions for Hungary due to its landlocked status, but for European countries without such geographic limits.
Many of those countries, they don't have those problems, and they buy a lot of oil and gas from Russia. And as they know, I'm very disturbed by that.
Meanwhile, Orbán hails his first White House visit in 6 years as a restoration of U.S.-Hungary relations.
So now we are in quite a good position to open up a new chapter, let's say a golden age between the United States and Hungary.
Orbán and President Trump finding common ground in their views on immigration, criticizing European countries for what they call a flood of illegal migration and crime.
We are kind of a special island of difference in a liberal ocean in Europe, and we consider ourselves as a modern Christian government.
Orban also says that the only pro-peace governments are the U.S. and Hungary. He says that other governments prefer to continue the war because they think that Ukraine can win, calling that, a quote, a misunderstanding. But when President Trump turned to Orban and asked him if Ukraine can win, Orban responded by saying miracles can happen. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. It's day 38 of the government shutdown. Senate Republicans tee up a vote on a package of bills to end the government shutdown, but Democrats publicly maintain their maximalist demands. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
Pressure is piling up to reopen government as flight cancellations hit major airports. Senate Republicans have offered yet another off-ramp to Democrats to reopen government by teeing up a series of votes on an extended continuing resolution, a trio of appropriation bills, a bill to pay federal employees, and a promise to vote on the extension of Affordable Care Act healthcare subsidies.
You're going to have a vote today, but if you fail, you're going to be having a vote on Sunday. You're going to work through the weekend.
I think that should be the expectation.
Some Democratic senators who have traditionally favored bipartisan compromise have signaled that they will keep government closed until they have guarantees that their policy demands are met.
Voters are telling Democrats they want us to stand up for what we believe in, and they want us to use our power to try to keep costs down.
Leader Thune just needs to add a clean one-year extension of the ACA tax credits to the CR so that we can immediately address rising health care costs.
Senate Republicans have made the case that the Affordable Care Act and the enhanced health care subsidies have benefited the insurance companies more than the American people.
441%. Humana, 490%. They need to up their game. MOLINA, whoever they are, 859%. SCNTENE, 604%. Aetna, 595% since the passage of this bill.
Senate and House Republicans maintain that they will not guarantee the extension of the ACA subsidies without significant debate and reform.
We are not, as Republicans, going to continue what you've created, a windfall for healthcare insurance companies, inflationary mechanisms in healthcare without an end. We're going to stop and fix what you created in 2010.
President Trump has insisted upon Senate Republicans that they should end the filibuster and reopen government.
He just wants to, he obviously wants to be a part of solving this problem. And as I've said, he's willing to sit down on the issue of health care with Democrats once the government opens up again.
It's important to know that any Senate-approved continuing resolution with an extended date would still need to go to the House of Representatives before being signed by the president. Until then, the government will remain closed. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
LAX in Los Angeles is one of the airports affected by the FAA flight reductions. NTD's Christina Corona spoke with travelers there to see whether they're experiencing any issues.
We're here at LAX, where it's one of 40 airports across the country facing flight reductions as the government shutdown continues. Starting today, the FAA is cutting flight capacity by 10% nationwide due to staffing shortages, impacting 5 airports across California, including LAX, San Francisco, Oakland, San Diego, and Ontario.
Some travelers say the process here has been surprisingly smooth.
I have checked my flight, so those are on time currently, so that's fine for me.
It's been good, I guess. Yeah, I guess.
According to FlightAware, at least 1,000 flights were called off nationwide Friday, 4 times the number canceled Thursday. Airports in Chicago, Atlanta, Denver, and Dallas led the way with the most disruptions. Officials say the reductions are meant to ease pressure on air traffic controllers, many of whom are working without pay. However, in Colorado, Denver Mayor Mike Johnston told Politico that the city has proposed paying air traffic controllers out of pocket to keep the nation's 3rd busiest airport running during the shutdown. The proposal, which still needs FAA approval, aims to prevent a 10% cut in flights at the Denver International Airport. The cuts began with a 4% reduction today, rising to 10% by November 14th, potentially disrupting holiday travel plans. Here at LAX, some passengers have already faced delays.
My friend got delayed today. Actually, I was supposed to be flight at 12, but it became 2 2 p.m. Like it's 2 hours delayed. Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm just gonna chill around here, like see around. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started my journey from Korea and I came to here and then I'm flying to Atlanta. So it's been smooth for me. No flight has been cancelled and I just got delayed for an hour, but that's fine.
United and American say most travelers were quickly rebooked. Airlines targeted smaller regional routes with multiple daily flights to limit disruptions. According to FlightAware, 54 flights have been canceled at LAX with 154 delays. At Ontario International Airport, there have been 8 cancellations and 22 delays. The FAA says international flights will not be affected, but domestic travelers should brace for longer lines and last-minute changes. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said if the shutdown continues and more controllers miss paychecks, flight cancellations could rise from 10% to 15 to 20%. Travelers are urged to check flight statuses frequently as delays and cancellations are expected to continue.
Things are calm at LAX right now, though we'll see how travelers are impacted as the flight reductions continue. Reporting from Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And if you're traveling soon, check the status of your flight with your airline. Some airline loyalty programs make it easy to cancel flights purchased with miles. The airlines that are temporarily providing waivers to change flights without fees include American, Delta, Southwest, United, and Frontier. Here are more tips for people flying or booking flights in the near future.
There's a number of things you should be doing to be aware.
Experts say travelers who plan to fly soon should know their options. Experts advise people departing within 10 days to keep an eye on their airline's app for changes. They say carriers likely will try to preserve their hub-to-hub operations and cut regional flights instead.
It may not be a bad idea to delay travel if it's non-essential, or if you're in a smaller city, perhaps to drive to one of the larger hubs if it's close by. And also consider buying a backup ticket.
Several airlines are letting passengers change their flights for free. The law requires them to issue refunds for cancellations, but they're unlikely to reimburse stranded passengers for meals or hotels. For people planning to buy tickets soon, experts suggest booking with airlines directly. They say that makes it easier to change flights. They recommend avoiding layovers if possible. And the Transportation Secretary suggests bracing for Thanksgiving impacts if the government stays closed.
If we have staffing triggers and we don't have enough controllers in an airspace where we did cut 10%, you might see additional delays.
With Congress still gridlocked over Obamacare subsidies, will either side budge? Hear from Congressman Don Bacon tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. As another candidate enters New York's gubernatorial race, current Governor Kathy Hochul says she's happy to battle every day in next year's election. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Representative Elise Stefanik announced on November 7th that she is running for governor of New York, taking on incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul. Stefanik has released statements over the past year criticizing Hochul. She also sought to tie Hochul to New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic socialist who won the city's election on Tuesday. In a campaign launch video shared on social media, Stefanik called Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul the worst governor in America and called New York the most unaffordable state in the nation.
The Empire State has fallen.
People are just going crazy over the amount of taxes here.
There's no question, New York is facing an affordability crisis.
Flashing images of Mamdani on the screen, the video claims Hochul cozied up to a defund the police, tax-hiking, anti-Semitic communist. Hochul's team quickly fired back with a video referring to Stefanik as Trump's #1 cheerleader, part of an effort to closely link the GOP lawmaker to the president.
Meet Elise Stefanik.
The greatest president in the history of our country, President Donald J. Trump.
She's Donald Trump's top ally in Congress.
I'm proud to be one of his top allies on Capitol Hill.
My message to Trump's top ally, bring it on, Hochul said. Hochul endorsed New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. Stefanik, in September, criticized her for the endorsement, calling Mamdani a communist who will destroy New York, making it less affordable and more dangerous. Once again putting criminals and communists first, and New Yorkers last. Still, with more than a combined $13 million cash on hand, Stefanik has tapped a number of former Trump advisors and longtime aides who worked in finance, communications, and operations roles to help launch her campaign. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
It's been a decade since the Supreme Court's landmark ruling to allow same-sex couples to marry. Now Supreme Court justices are weighing a bid to overturn that decision. The pending appeal comes from Kim Davis. She is a former clerk in Kentucky who refused court orders to issue same-sex marriage licenses in 2015 due to her religious beliefs. The Davis appeal is one of dozens the justices will consider to hear in a private meeting today. The court could announce as soon as Monday what it will do with the case. It could also hold the appeal for weeks, which often happens when one or more justices want to write an opinion about a decision to deny a case. Coming up, Cornell University strikes an agreement with the Trump administration, how much it will pay and what changes it will make in order to have federal funding restored. The Department of Homeland Security says new ICE applications have surged into the hundreds of thousands. Jason Blair with the details when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Cornell University has agreed to pay $60 million and comply with civil rights law in exchange for the government's restoration of federal funding. Education Secretary Linda McMahon called the agreement a transformative commitment that puts a focus on merit, rigor, and truth-seeking. Cornell's president said the deal ensures the university's academic freedom while restoring more than $250 million in research funding. The university agreed to pay $30 million to the government, along with another $30 million for research that will support American farmers. The campus must also provide admissions data to ensure race is no longer being considered as a factor in admissions decisions. In 2023, the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action in the university admissions process was unconstitutional. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says 200,000 new applicants are seeking employment with ICE. The agency is looking to ramp up deportations as current numbers are in the hundreds of thousands. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
With the Trump administration on track to shatter the annual deportation number, the DHS says that 200,000 new applications have come in for ICE. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says Americans are answering their country's call to serve and help remove murderers, pedophiles, rapists, terrorists, and gang members from the country. This comes despite ongoing protests against ICE and the agency reporting an 8,000% increase in death threats towards their agents. And multiple ICE facilities have been attacked, with several of those being in Texas, including a facility in Dallas, resulting in a detainee being shot and killed. Texas has been the state with the most ICE arrests. Numbers show 1 in 4 arrests in the U.S. have been in the Lone Star State, and the state's numbers have almost doubled. Texas also holds the second highest illegal immigrant population. Many leaders have been openly critical about tactics used by ICE during operations. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has alleged that ICE was intentionally targeting, quote, brown and black people.
It's a military-style assault on Chicago and our suburbs. In the short time, we have witnessed countless acts of harassment and intimidation and brutality and abuse of power.
The DHS has stated on multiple occasions that many allegations are false or twisted versions of what actually happened. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Several pharmaceutical giants have said they will sell drugs directly to patients in the U.S. and have offered price cuts. That's after President Trump's calls to bring down drug prices. So what are the major drug makers offering? Take a look.
AstraZeneca and the Trump administration signed a deal on October the 10th. The company will sell some medicines at a discount to the government's Medicaid plan in exchange for tariff relief. Trump said the firm would invest $50 billion in the U.S. for drug development over the next 5 years.
Today, AstraZeneca is committing to offer all of their prescription medications to Medicaid at most favored nations prices. In other words, the lowest price anywhere in the world, that's what we get. A move that will save American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars each year.
Eli Lilly has also made moves. In June, it said it would ship the 2 highest doses of its popular weight loss drug Zepbound to cash-paying customers on its website, starting early August. The Danish company Novo Nordisk said in August that it would offer its diabetes drug Ozempic for $499 per month. This would be for eligible cash-paying patients with type 2 diabetes in the US via its own pharmacy. US-based Pfizer and Trump said earlier in October they had cut a deal. The drug maker agreed to lower prescription drug prices in the Medicaid program compared to what it charged other countries in exchange for tariff relief. Pfizer's CEO said it will invest $70 billion in research and development, as well as domestic manufacturing. Roche has said it's considering selling its prescription medicines directly to US consumers to slash patient costs. In July, the firm's CEO spoke of ongoing talks with the US government. French drug maker Sanofi said in September it would offer a month's supply of any of its insulin products for $35 to all US patients with a valid prescription. That's regardless of insurance status.
President Trump is asking the Justice Department to investigate meatpacking companies. He says they're driving up the price of beef in the U.S. Trump says the companies are using illicit collusion, price fixing, and price manipulation. The president didn't mention the names of any companies in his post. Ranchers have long complained about companies having a monopoly. The Department of Agriculture says that over 80% of the market is concentrated in just 4 corporations. Trump says these firms shouldn't be criminally profiting at the expense of the American people. Coming up, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad hands over a body said to be that of a deceased hostage. Meanwhile, residents in the Gaza Strip pray in a damaged mosque as they adjust to life after the war. Jason Perry reports. And what are the key takeaways from Wednesday's Supreme Court arguments on President Trump's global tariffs? A former U.S. diplomat and attorney with experience in international trade joins us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In the Middle East, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad has handed over another body said to be that of a deceased hostage. Meanwhile, residents in the Gaza Strip held Friday prayers in a damaged mosque as they adjust to life after the war. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
On Friday, the Red Cross received another body from terrorists in the Gaza Strip. And this time, it was the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist group that handed over the body, which they say is of a deceased hostage. The body will be transferred to Israel's National Institute for Forensic Medicine for identification. And if confirmed to be that of a hostage, that will mean that the bodies of 5 hostages still remain in the territory. On the same day, a funeral was held for Captain Omer Nutra, whose body was recently returned in accordance with the Gaza peace plan brokered by President Trump. Nutra was an Israeli American and was killed while defending Israeli communities on October 7th. The commander of the United States Central Command spoke at his funeral and called Omer, quote, the hero of 2 countries. Omer's father also spoke.
My Omer was only 21, but in moments like these, you don't see age, you see a soul. We know that until your last breath, you thought of others, of the team, of your friends, of the people of Israel.
Around the same time in the Gaza Strip, men gathered in a damaged mosque for Friday prayers. The imam of the mosque shared his thoughts on the situation.
After the ceasefire, things are currently stable, although the mosque is not fully ready for prayers. We pray that the coming days will be better and that we will be able to rebuild this mosque and all of Gaza, God willing.
Meanwhile, an envoy from the United Arab Emirates visited officials in Cyprus, which is expected to assist in the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip by sea.
It is so important that you have a guaranteed way to safely and transparently deliver critical aid through a coordinated maritime route that has been tested in practice and has proven to be successful in dire circumstances.
And in Lebanon, workers were seen cleaning the debris of an Israeli airstrike. A local resident explained what happened.
My family received a call and were told to evacuate the house, saying there was a terrorist house next to ours. As you can see, the damage is severe, a heavy strike. In the end, it's not a problem. This doesn't affect us.
The Lebanese government previously said they planned to disarm the Hezbollah terrorist group by the end of the year. But the Iran-backed group in southern Lebanon has now vowed not to give up their weapons. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The Supreme Court held high-stakes arguments on Wednesday over the legality of President Trump's global tariffs. The justices probed whether Trump's reciprocal and fentanyl tariffs were authorized by a 1970s emergency powers law. Multiple federal courts have held that Trump's tariffs exceeded what Congress authorized under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. The government argued that Congress allowed Trump to exercise that power through the IEEPA, which allows presidents to regulate imports, among other things, in response to emergencies. Joining us now to discuss is retired Marine Colonel and former U.S. diplomat Grant Newsham. He's an attorney with experience in international trade and public international law. He's also the author of When China Attacks. Grant, thank you so much for joining us now. Well, it's hard to predict where the court leans. Many are saying the High Court seems skeptical of Trump's broad use of IEEPA. Given that President Trump has been using tariffs as leverage on other countries, what would be the impact of the court rules against him?
Well, the impact would be very serious for what Mr. Trump is trying to do. The way that trade law has built up over the years, really since World War II, have really set things almost in concrete. So it's very hard to change. And as a result, America was absorbing sort of too many exports. It was accepting too many sort of non-tariff barriers and just outright sort of protective behavior by our counterparts, both our friends, our foes, and people in between. So to change that, you really needed something as strong. And that's what Mr. Trump did with these blanket tariffs applied to almost every country on earth. And that got people's attention. And you saw many countries were saying, what do we have to do to fix things? And they realized that actually they were getting the better of the United States in most cases. So if you take away what Mr. Trump has done, this tool that he had and he was using, suddenly you go back to the old system and you're going to find that other countries are going to say, well, we don't really have to worry so much about keeping the United States happy. Mr. Trump will be hamstrung in his efforts to use this tool really to defend U.S. interests and to effectively force other countries to say, yeah, we haven't been playing in a particularly sort of fair game and we'll make some changes. Now they can almost don't have to do that. And they can even say, well, give us our money back because tariffs were improperly imposed. That, of course, assumes that the Supreme Court rules against Mr. Trump's broad use of tariffs. It's not clear exactly how they will rule on this. I suspect they're going to rein him in somewhat. They may allow some carve-outs as well for emergency measures taken, say, on the grounds of the fentanyl crisis.
And speaking of money, what would be the impact on Americans if this is largely overturned, given that U.S. Customs data shows that American businesses have spent nearly $90 billion to cover the IEEPA tariffs?
Well, I don't know that the financial effects are going to be all that difficult, all that big a deal. I think a couple things that are going to be problems is trying to figure out, who improperly paid tariffs, and then you're going to have to figure out some way to refund them. It could be, of course, that the court just says, well, anything that's happened has happened, and it's only going to apply to future transactions here. But another aspect is that the U.S. has received a lot of money from tariffs. It goes into the sort of the fund, into our coffers, and you cut these out, and that's the loss of a pretty tidy sum of money that the U.S. has been receiving in the last few months owing to President Trump's tariffs.
Now, President Trump has been calling this one of the most important cases in the history of our country, adding that his tariff threats against Beijing were a national security lifeline that forced Xi Jinping to the bargaining table. To your point earlier, what other options would President Trump have to issue tariffs if IEEPA was reined in to an extent?
Well, there's a couple other laws apply, and one of these it's called Section 232, and that applies in cases of national emergency. When a national emergency of some sort is declared, the president has pretty broad power to do things like set tariffs and other trade regulations. There's something called Section 301, where another country is engaging in unfair trade practices. In that case, once again, the executive has a lot of power in what they do, to include setting tariffs. However, the problem here is that these are generally, well, one, a national emergency. You can argue over what is an emergency or isn't, and that's where the argument is going to be made. On unfair trade practices, generally the response has been on a product or a sector-by-sector basis, as opposed to blanket sanctions. But it is worth noting that Congress over the years has given the presidency a lot of power to handle trade policy, including tariffs, and even the Biden administration was pretty aggressive in using what it called the executive authority to set tariffs against things like Chinese electric vehicles, Chinese shipbuilding, for example. So this has been a tug of war for a long time as to whether Congress or the presidency has authority over trade. Congress has given the presidency a lot of power over it. And sometimes they try to pull it in, and sometimes they do that for political reasons, whether or not there'd be as big a fuss being raised if a Democratic president had done what President Trump did. I have my doubts. But nonetheless, what President Trump has done has really had an effect. If you look at how other countries view the United States, their dealings with the United States, and not just on the trade front, but also on the sort of the political front, just nation to nation. And take this away, and I think you'd find President Trump would appear a bit diminished in the eyes of counterparties, I said both our friends and our enemies and people in between.
Expanding on that, part of President Trump's deals to lower tariffs on other countries included investment or agreements in boosting American shipbuilding, like we saw with South Korea. Now, this actually comes as China just commissioned its third aircraft carrier, the Fujian. What kind of power projection capabilities does that give China in the region?
Well, it expands them considerably. And if China does use its aircraft carriers, sends them out and about in the region, and they've demonstrated some very good capabilities in use of aircraft from an aircraft carrier, which is what they're for, that this would intimidate a lot of people in the region. But it's always important, though, when you consider something like the new Chinese aircraft carrier and the three they've got now, and maybe have a fourth one under construction, is to play it out 5-10 years, and you will see what China's intentions are, and that is to have a blue water global navy. They've already got a blue water navy that can operate well beyond Chinese territorial waters, but a global navy is what they're after, and you need aircraft carriers to do that. So they're going to build up a fleet at least as big as ours, probably bigger. And the idea is to operate worldwide with the influence, both political influence, psychological influence that comes of that. So just because they've only got 3 and we have 11 or so, doesn't mean that we should sort of rest. But China's intentions are, as I said, to build up a navy that can not just match ours, but that can defeat ours, and ultimately to be a global military, a global force, just like we are, and carriers are part of that. So it's always best to look out 5, 10, 15 years to see where the Chinese intend to be, and whether or not they're going to get there. And if you look at what they've done over the last 20 years, one would do well not to deflate the threat and assume that they will never be a global military just like ours. Carriers are a part of that.
Now, in terms of that psychological influence that you're speaking of, when it comes to the name Fujian, that is also the name of the province that's right across from Taiwan. Is this a message in terms of a potential Taiwan invasion?
No, it's part of it. The Chinese have plenty of other hardware, ships, aircraft, ground forces, amphibious capabilities that they can deploy against Taiwan, use to intimidate. Aircraft carriers are just one piece of the puzzle. They'd be very useful, of course, in an all-out assault on Taiwan, but particularly it's worth considering that these are not just intended for Taiwan, but rather the entire region and ultimately the globe. But the carriers would be useful as part of the arsenal, or the inventory that the People's Liberation Army has when it looks at how it is going to go after Taiwan, if it someday thinks it needs to sort of go kinetic, as the expression is used.
Well, concerning indeed. Grant Newsham, as always, though, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Coming up, NVIDIA's stock value dropping all week by as much as 10%. Some investors are concerned, but others are optimistic. David Lamb reports from Silicon Valley. And in college football, we have a number of big games scheduled this weekend with playoff spots on the line. Dave Martin joins us for a preview when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. James Watson, one of the Nobel Prize winners for discovering the structure of DNA, died today after a brief illness. He was 97 years old. Watson and two other scientists discovered DNA double helix structure in 1953. Together, they shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology of Medicine in 1962. Watson later became the first director of the groundbreaking Human Genome Project. It's the international research effort with the goal of mapping out the human genome. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in the NFL as Fox Sports has confirmed that Mark Sanchez will not return as an analyst while facing multiple charges after his alleged attack on a truck driver last month. Who will replace him?
Yeah, they're replacing him with another former NFL quarterback, Drew Brees. Now, Brees retired in 2020. He's eligible for the Hall of Fame in 2026, should be a shoo-in for that. This guy won a Super Bowl. He finished runner-up for the MVP 4 different times. Now, meanwhile, Sanchez has been off the air since that October 4th incident. Now, he's been released from the hospital after being stabbed during that incident, but has not addressed the allegations other than to say he's focused on his recovery. Now, his trial is set to start for December 11th. He faces a felony charge and 3 misdemeanors. He's currently free on bond. Now, meanwhile, the truck driver has claimed self-defense. He is suing Sanchez and Fox Sports for unspecified damages. So that's the latest in the case.
Does he have like a contract and a lot of money tied to it? Like, is that gonna get thrown out?
Well, you mean Sanchez?
Yes.
I assume so. I mean, I would assume there's some kind of, public image clause in the contract. Fox Sports just let out a statement very simply confirming that he no longer was working for them. I think they just want to put this matter behind them as far as possible. So we don't quite know all that, but for most of those public figures, that's what they have.
Probably working out the details.
Probably.
Well, moving to
basketball. Lawyers are busy at the moment, I'll say that.
Moving to basketball news, though, former NBA player Damon Jones, who was among those charged in the recent betting scandal, pleaded not guilty yesterday. When is he due back in court?
Yeah, November 24th is his next court date. There's a preliminary conference there with some other defendants in this trial, so about 2.5 weeks away. Now, Jones was charged in both sides of this. There was the allegations of rigged poker games and then the sports betting part. Jones played, though, 11 seasons in the NBA, was a very good shooter, played with LeBron James in Cleveland for a few years there. He's accused of selling non-public betting information, according to prosecutors. Specifically, LeBron James was injured and would miss this specific game in 2023 between the Lakers and the Bucks before the general public had that information. Now, in the poker scheme, prosecutors say Jones was among a number of former players used to lure innocent poker players, I guess, to the game. This is quite an eye-opening case overall, including some, well-known crime families. Although, I gotta say, I did not know the names of these crime families. I don't know about you, Tiff. I don't know anything about those. I felt a little left out when everyone said they knew these crime family names, but I didn't know them. Maybe you.
I mean, I still think it's crazy, like the whole story. Like what?
I know, it's a lot. Like the rigged poker games, allegedly they had those x-ray tables where you could, if the cards were down, so you could somehow see what everybody's hands was. And it sounded like, according to prosecutors, everybody was in on it except for the poor sucker that they lured to the actual game there. So it was quite a thing. To read the prosecutor's statement, it sounded like quite the game they had going on there.
Two versions of games.
Yes, 2 versions of games.
I want to switch gears to baseball, though, because a White House official confirmed today that President Trump has pardoned former MLB great Darryl Strawberry.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story here. Strawberry says he got a call from Trump last night. Trump started talking about how great a baseball player Strawberry was, back in the 80s, especially with the Mets. And then he said he was granting him a full pardon from his past. Now, Strawberry, big star in the 80s, especially led the Mets to a World Series title. He was an 8-time All-Star, finished runner-up for MVP in 1988. Very, very popular, very successful player. In 1995, Strawberry was indicted for tax evasion. The following year, he was sentenced to probation after pleading no contest to charges of cocaine possession and soliciting a prostitute. He also was charged multiple times with violating the terms of his probation. Eventually spent 11 months in prison in 2003. But a White House official noted that Strawberry found faith in Christianity and has been sober for more than a decade and become active in ministry. So a nice story here for Strawberry. If you were a sports fan at all in the 80s and 90s, you definitely knew who he was. The guy was 6'6". He hit some mammoth home runs. He was also very fast too. So he was, everybody liked Strawberry, Tiff. I'll just tell you that, all right? I know you weren't around for that, but if you were, you would have liked the guy, all right?
All right, and quite the redemption arc there too.
Yeah, redemption. It's a great story.
Looking at tomorrow's college football action, though, we have another full slate of games on the schedule. What matchups stand out to you?
Yeah, good question here. I've highlighted a few. We've got first one, 7th-ranked BYU is at number 8, Texas Tech. Now, this is the only game this weekend involving a pair of top 10 teams. It's also for control of the Big 12. Now, BYU is currently in first place with a 5-0 record. Texas Tech, meanwhile, right behind them at 5-1, tied with Cincinnati. Both teams already have wins over 13th-ranked Utah. That game starts at noon Eastern tomorrow. Then at 3:30, another couple of good ones. 3rd-ranked Texas A&M is at 22nd-ranked Missouri. The Aggies are undefeated. They've got wins over Notre Dame and LSU. Missouri's only losses are to ranked teams Vanderbilt and Alabama. And at the same time in the Big Ten, 9th-ranked Oregon is at number 20 Iowa. The Ducks are kind of a forgotten team, I feel like, right now. They're 7-1, ranked number 9. They only have one loss. Hawkeyes are actually tied with them for 3rd place in the Big Ten at 4-1 there. Then in the evening, 4th-ranked Alabama hosts LSU, 7:30 Eastern time. Now the Tigers are no longer ranked, but this has always been a good rivalry game, dating back to the years that Nick Saban would face his old team with Bama. I mean, he won titles at both schools there. Nick Saban, very good, by the way, Tiff. So those are the matchups tomorrow that I will especially be watching, when I'm not watching, Kansas and Kansas State, but unfortunately, they're not ranked, You have to be good to be ranked. So these are the good games, though, Tiff, all right?
So in other words, you have a packed weekend.
I have a very packed weekend, and the World Series isn't even over, and I'm still got a very packed weekend. So it ended just in time for me, all right?
Well, we're happy for you.
I know you are.
Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
Is there an AI bubble? For the past week, NVIDIA stock value has been dropping. Some investors are concerned, but others remain optimistic. NTD's David Lamb has more.
Amid fluctuations this week, the stock value of major tech company NVIDIA dropped by 10% as of market close on Friday.
If we're in a bubble, which I don't think we are per se, but if we are, I don't think it would have the type of crash we had in the early 2000s. That said, we have to keep our head on a swivel and be mindful of the investments we're making, because if it's not a bubble now, we could create one with overexuberance, for sure.
The valuations for artificial intelligence continue to be on the minds of investors. Concerns over a possible stock market bubble driven by AI have led to bumpy trading for major tech companies known as the Magnificent Seven. And the circular investments among companies in the AI sector have drawn criticism for their risk. But some entrepreneurs at an AI summit in Silicon Valley are hopeful. Andy Mathis, an executive at a virtual reality firm, says it's arguable whether there's an over-dependency on some of the big tech companies.
That said, I think it'll come down to, are these large ventures, not so much the NVIDIAs, but the other companies that are making investments, are they driving revenues? And are those revenues growing? If so, I feel like we're in for a relatively stable ride. If not, then yeah, it could get ugly.
One CEO says the stock market fluctuation isn't something he thinks people should focus on.
It reminds me of Amazon's stock a lot of years ago, like when it was going down, but then the company was doing really good. So I don't really monitor it because we know the innovations coming along, but that would change a lot in the future.
And a high school student added this.
I'm not totally worried about it because I feel like it's so important. Like there's so many eyes on it, and I feel like it needs a little bit more refinement than we think it does.
Recently, Trump administration officials said there are no plans to bail out AI companies. And OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said the company doesn't want government guarantees for its data centers. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.